So today is lesson 10. We are going to be starting into authentication with PHP. It's going to continue on. There's way too much to do to cram into one class. So today we are going to introduce assignment 2. I'm going to do that in a moment. We're going to talk about sessions and cookies. We're going to talk about hashing and encryption. And then we are going to start the process of implementing the ability for users to register and log into our site. Hopefully should be able to complete that portion today. And then next week, we will look at securing access to resources, SSL encryption, login, logout, as well as some other security related concerns. So I want to go into assignment 2. It is now posted here on D2L. And there are actually 2 options available for you here. So there's 2 versions of the assignment. I'm going to go over each one. So there's 2 different Word documents. There's an A and a B, and you are free to choose. So I'm going to go over option A first, actually. So option A is a smaller, simpler assignment, but your grade will be scaled to 80%. You cannot get any better than an 80%. So basically, I'll take your mark, I will mark and multiply it by 0.8, and that will be your grade. So the option for here is to take assignment 1 and to extend it. To assignment 1, we are basically performing create and read operations. You will need to add, update, and delete functionality. You'll need to implement security that we're going to be doing over the next few classes, implement a common element like a header, as well as error handling. So basically all the things we've been doing in class since, in the lesson, since you submitted assignment 1, you will be adding in. So to submit, due on April the 3rd. Okay, so you have 2 weeks to do this. You'll submit your Git repository link. You can use the same repository as for assignment 1. You don't have to create another one. If you choose to create another repository, that's fine, but you can use the same one. You must make at least 4 commits with descriptive commit messages. Those must be done on at least 2 calendar dates, and it should be more. Make sure you use the Git commands. You're not doing drag and drop, because that will prevent you from adding descriptive commit names. You'll submit a link to the live server. Your link, you must use the fully qualified domain. So I do not want to see links that start with the 15 IP address, because that does not support SSL. Security is part of the assignment. You must use lamp.computer studies in your link with the secure HTTPS link. Okay, so you will lose marks for the security and deployment if you give me a plain HTTP link to the IP address starting with 15. And your repository needs a proper README file. You must do the work on your own. You can't do it with anyone else or download code off the internet for your assignment. So your due date is Sunday, April 3rd. If you make commits after that, I will ignore them and I will mark the version that was uploaded before the due date. So on to assignment 1, you will add the following features. You're going to add a home page that describes what your site is and how you built it. You will include a shared header like we created last week in class. The header should have links to your new home page as well as the pages you created for assignment 1. On the page you created in assignment 1, where your data is displayed in HTML format, you're going to add a link to create a new record, as well as links for editing and deleting. And deleting will require a confirmation feature, much like we did in our PHP tunes. Okay, you will implement the ability to edit and delete records. You're going to implement error handling, so 404 handling with using htaccess, a general error page, and try catch blocks in all of your code anywhere that's accessing the database and working with the data. You're going to build functioning register, login, and logout pages. We will build these today. Logout, that will probably wait until next week. You will modify your header. So anonymous users will see the register and login links. A user who has logged in will see their username and logout instead, and the register and login links will be hidden. Again, we'll do this in class over the next couple of weeks. You're also going to need to add access controls to the create, edit, and delete pages and links. So only after someone is logged into the site will see those links will they be able to access those pages. Oops, sorry, I will remove this requirement here. Document requirements I'm taking out. You'll implement CSS. You can either use your own, you can use Bootstrap or a framework. Your site must look different. It should not look like the PHP Tuned app. So use different colors, make it different. And then deploy to GitHub and AWS. So if you meet all these requirements, you will get an 80%. There are 2 possible bonus marks for additional PHP functionality that you've learned independently. I can't help you with the bonus marks, so you can't email me and ask for help. You must do it on your own, and it must be fully working to get bonus marks. If you've attempted something and it isn't complete, there's no bonus. Okay, so to get the bonus, it has to actually work. So some additional PHP feature that we have not covered in class. Let's re-upload this version of the document. Delete that and just re-upload. Are there any questions about the first option? Yes, that's fine, Mike. Yeah, that's considered the same. Just not the drag and drop, because when you drag and drop, the commit messages aren't descriptive. It just says upload file, commit files via upload. So there's no way to distinguish what changes were made between each commit. It is, well, that's, I'm sorry I told you then. Any changes about any questions, other questions? Yes, it is about the first option for the assignment. You don't need to tell me ahead of time which version you're doing. So it is up to you to decide. I will go through option B as well. It's more complicated. Okay, so for option B, you can get up to 100%. You will be building an entirely separate application for option B. So for option B, you're building a content management system. So the idea of a content management system is that it allows us to create a website, give it to a client, and allow our client who doesn't know anything about HTML or coding to create and manage the content of their own website. So if they want to create a new page or they want to update content on the website, we are building an area for them to make those changes without having to do any coding. That way they don't need to contact us every time they want to change content on the website. And this is the way most modern web applications are built. Okay, so same due date applies. You'll submit the same things, a private Git repository link. You'll need to make the same kind of commits. And again, you'll give me your live link. You will need a new repository for this. You won't be able to repurpose your assignment 1 repository. And this should say April 3rd, so I will also again. Okay, I've created about a 6-minute walkthrough. I've built a little sample content manager or CMS before. So there's a YouTube video you can watch after class to get a better sense of how it works. I'm not going to play the video right now. It is entirely up to you which of these 2 you choose. If you're doing well in the course and you feel you've got a pretty good handle, PHP is making sense to you, then I would encourage you, go ahead and build the content manager. Okay. You're going to learn a lot from it. You're going to get a better sense of how PHP is working, and you're going to be challenged. If you're really struggling through this course, then the content management system may be a bit too complex for you, and you would probably be better with option A if you are finding that PHP's a challenge for you. Then doing assignment A would be a better option. So in assignment B, you're really building a two-part website. One part is an admin site. This would be the site you would give access to your client for. And they would be able to manage users as well as manage the web page content through your database. That's the one side of the website. The other side, the public-facing side, is the side that visitors would see. So when an administrator creates a new page in the admin panel, it would generate a new page, kind of a virtual page on the public website. So the site control panel should allow users to sign up with hashed passwords, validate the inputs, and make sure that there are no duplicate usernames. There should be the ability to log in and log out of the site. There should be a list of all of the users of the site and the ability to edit or delete a user account. And then the real core of the application is here, the ability to create, read, update, and delete web pages. Now, when I say web page, this really is just a record in the database. You're not creating physical pages. They are virtual pages. If you're not sure what this means, again, you can watch the video, watch my demo, and see how this works. If it still doesn't make sense to you after watching the demo, then I would advise you to do option A. The entire admin panel should be password protected, so somebody must log in to access any of those admin features. And then there is the public website that has a shared header, and the links in the header come from the page names created in the database. So part of the way I will test your CMS is I will log into the admin panel, I'll create a new page, and as soon as I do, I should see a new link in the navigation bar. And then you'll create a public page called index.php that is content managed. So this page will take an ID parameter, and when I click on a link, the content manager will load the content from the database that is connected to that link. Okay, so you're not creating physical pages. Each page is just a record in the database with a page ID, a page title, and the actual page content. Okay, so the links in your navigation bar will be dynamic. When a new page is added in the admin panel, it will create a new link in the nav bar. If that link text is changed, the nav bar link will update, and if that page is deleted, the link should be removed from the navigation. There should be at least 5 virtual pages, and you should populate each page with some content. So I don't care what the content is, but it should look like a real website. So you can either make a business up, or you could even make a page, make up a website for a business that you like. You know, if you have a favorite restaurant or pub or place you like to go, make up a web page for them. And then you will do some customizing of the look and feel so it looks different from our in-class application. And then you'll implement the error handling techniques that we used in class last week. Yeah, and the assignment is out of 28, but scaled full to 100%, unlike assignment A. I've had students build the content manager in the past. I will tell you now, if you're going to choose option B, you need to get started this week. You cannot build this in a weekend. This is probably going to take in the neighborhood of about 20 hours to do. Okay, so you'll definitely need to get started on this pretty much right away if you want to build the content management system. It is not like a 5 to 8 hour project, it's bigger. Just re-upload this version as well because I made a quick change in it. And I'm happy to take questions. This is the biggest part of your grade. It's worth even more than your final exam, I believe. Okay, so I've updated those documents on D2L. Are there any questions about either version of the assignment? And so after class, if you're looking at the CMS, please watch the video that's linked in the description. I've built out a sample content manager so you can, I've done a walkthrough, you can see how it works and decide if you want to tackle that or if you're going to stick with option A. Okay, this brings me to a really simple lab. Okay, it's a non-coding lab. If you're watching this video, you have to complete it by tonight at midnight, but I'm going to allocate probably 5 minutes in class is all we need, a couple easy marks for you. So there's a link here on D2L. What do you think of when you think of web application security? It's this lab 4. It's a web page link. So I want you to go here, go to Miro.com. I want you to add a sticky note with a comment. You can just write it in point form. Don't write in sentences because there's not a lot of room. And make sure you include your name. So if you open this up, it's going to jump you here. I've put a sticky note in the middle. My question, what do you think about when you think of web application security? So just jump over and grab a sticky note, paste it in, put in a point form answer and add your name because it is graded. So if you don't give me your name, I can't give you a mark. Do not put anything else on here. No doodles, no stickies. Try this link, Alex. So only a sticky note. I don't want other images or doodles on here. It should be public. As anybody can edit. You can also try the second link if you can't. Okay, good. Okay, so add a sticky note, add a point form answer, and put your name on. What do you think about it when you hear web application security? What does this mean to you? What comes to mind? I'm going to pause the recording, give you 5 minutes to add your sticky. So we're going to resume the recording. So there's our lab. Yes, you guys are worker bees. Pretty easy couple percent, isn't it? Probably a little more interesting than just having me ramble on. So we're going to address a lot of these things over the next few classes. So we'll come back. You've hit on many things we're going to deal with about data protection, about encryption, about strong passwords, about controlling access to resources. So I think someone mentioned reCAPTCHA, which we're going to implement later on. So we won't necessarily be able to do everything. Input validation. Two-factor authentication I would love to implement. We're a little bit limited. In our case, we probably won't be able to implement it, but ideally we would. Okay, so we've got a pretty good list going. So if you haven't added your sticky note or you're watching the lesson asynchronously later, make sure you post your sticky note for your 2.5, easy 2.5%. That'll be available tonight. Okay, simple lab, but I think it's good conversation. I wanted to kind of prime your brains, get you thinking a little bit. So I'm just going to go over a quick walkthrough of kind of what we are going to do today, how we're going to implement this. These slides are on. Okay, try it again, Terry. It should. Don't use the comment, use the sticky note. Yeah, the comments aren't always visible. So the instructions were to use the sticky note feature. So please use this rather than the comment. Use a sticky note. So this was my list, and I think you've addressed a lot of these things. I've added a couple of others. So one is about database backups, and we're also going to talk about using sessions and cookies. I think everything else somebody has already mentioned in our Miro whiteboard. So what does our workflow kind of look like? I know this is a little bit hard to see. So how would we control access to a web page? So user wants to see a page, web server returns that page, but before we let them in, we want to know, who is the user? Do we know who they are? Have they already logged in? If so, yeah, we're going to show them the page. If not, our workflow typically works something like this. We're going to show them the login page, let them enter their credentials, and then we're going to check that against our data store somehow. Do we have this user with that username password combination in our database? If we don't, we're going to say to the user, give them some indicator, their login attempt failed, and typically we'll take them back to the login screen. If they provide valid credentials, then typically we're going to store who they are. We'll talk about this in a bit, and then we'll take them back to the resource that they originally asked to see. That's our kind of basic workflow. And we've got a couple of mechanisms for this part, this storing of a user identity. So why do we have to do this? Remember, HTTP is stateless. So what this means is every HTTP request is a blank slate, right? If we refresh a page or we navigate from one page to another, any values, anything we had stored in memory is wiped out when that new request gets made. So this becomes a problem for identifying users, because as they move around their site, if we just store their identity in a variable, that identity gets lost every time they make a new request. So we need some way to persist their identity, so as a user moves around the site, we know who they are and what it is they're allowed to do. So we've got a few options for managing this in any kind of web application. We can use sessions, we can use cookies, or we can use a combination. And we'll sort of talk about the differences in a bit. Actually, you know what? We'll talk about them right now. What the heck? What's the difference? If I was interviewing a junior web developer, this would absolutely be one of the questions I would ask in an interview. What's the difference between a session and a cookie? And would you use one? Would you use the other? Would you use both for user authentication? What is a session? What is a cookie? How are they different? And which one do you think is more secure? Okay, cookies, Idan, are correct. The cookie is stored on the user's computer. Jack says, yeah, cookie is permanent. Well, it could be permanent. When we create a cookie, we set an expiration date. So we could set it for, 100 years from now, or we could set it for 10 minutes from now. Andrew says, cookies are stored locally, and sessions are wiped when the browser is closed. Andrew, you're absolutely right. Okay, so cookies are stored in your browser. You can open up your browser settings and you can actually view the cookies. Yama says the sessions stored the variable in a temp directory on the web server. That's right. So the sessions are stored server side. Cookies are stored client side. They should, Alexander. The stale cookie. So which do you think is more secure? If the session is stored on the web server and a cookie is stored in the browser, which is going to be more secure? One I would say is more secure and one is more convenient. Is it going to be safer to store information about our user in their browser or on the web server? Tony says the session is more secure because it's server side only. So the users have no way to access the session. But the cookies are actually text files that we can open up and read. Now, most modern websites will encrypt the cookies, so they're harder to hack, but users can still modify them or delete them or block them, whereas users can't do any of those things regarding the session. Now, some websites will use both, right? And the cookies can also persist for a very long time. And as somebody mentioned earlier, the sessions will end. There are 3 ways to end a session. Close your browser, log out, or sessions will typically expire after a period of inactivity. So if you don't make any HTTP requests, you don't refresh your page, you just leave a website alone, by default, most web servers will end your session after 20 minutes of inactivity. Now, how can you tell whether a website, sometimes you can tell when they're using a combination. How could you tell as an end user when you go to log into a website? There's often a visual cue that will tell us that they're using both sessions and cookies, or they're giving you an option. How would you know as a user? Could be Yama. It's actually a bit more specific. Sometimes when you see, it's an option that we might see on a login screen. Andrew, that's similar. Good guess. That's actually a feature of the browser itself. It's built into the browser software. Right. Akeem and Mike said the remember me option or keep me logged in. So if you don't check that option, then typically those sites are using sessions. They're storing you on the web server. And if you close your browser, your session you'd have to log in again if you came back. When you check remember me or keep me logged in, it's setting a cookie, meaning you can you can close the browser, you can shut off your device, you can come back later or tomorrow and go back to the site you're still logged in. So that's using a cookie that persists in your browser. They don't transfer browser to browser, but it will live in your browser even if you power off the device or come back much later. So I don't recommend this for any sensitive websites, by the way. For example, like choosing that remember me option on something like your bank account is a terrible idea, awful idea. If someone takes your device, well, you're basically logged in already. So for sites that aren't that sensitive, okay, maybe you can choose that remember me option. For something important, never. Like your social media accounts, you should not stay logged into those. You should be logging in and out of those. Banking, anything financial, credit cards, log in every time you want to use them. We're also going to need to look at handling passwords, right? Absolutely never, ever, ever can we store passwords in plain text. So we're going to need to convert those passwords. So something like, password 1234, it'll have to be converted into something unreadable. So we can use hashing or we can use encryption, right? Now, here's another great interview question for a junior developer. And I guarantee you this will be on your quiz this week. What's the difference? Both hashing and encryption will convert a value like this into a value like this, but what's the difference? Hashing and encryption are similar, but they're not the same. So we need to be clear on the distinction, and we need to figure out which one of these do we want to use and why. What's the difference between hashing and encryption, and which one should we use for passwords? Okay, Tuani says hashing is one-way scrambling, whereas encryption is a scrambling that can be undone, right? So hashing is one way, encryption is 2 ways. So why would hashing be safer? Why are we going to hash the passwords instead of encrypting them? Right, because we never want this value to be converted back into the plain text value. If we encrypt, we can decrypt. Right, Alexander, that's right. We want to just compare hashed values. And we can tell most websites use hashing because what happens in a web application typically when you forget your password? Yep, that's right, Jack. So what happens when you forget your password? Yeah, have to reset it, right? There's no way. Years ago, you could identify yourself, and often websites would email you. They could decrypt or email you your original password. Nowadays, we never do that because passwords are hashed. There is no way to unhash or reverse them. So the only option when we forget is a reset. We definitely want to implement strong password rules. As reading this weekend, experts are now advising we should actually use a minimum of 12 characters, but we're going to implement rules. We're going to make passwords minimum of 8, and we're going to enforce some other rules like a digit, an uppercase, and a lowercase. Yes, Alexander, we're glad you mentioned that. We will talk about salting as well. So we want our password hashes to be unique. So if Alexander and I create an account and we use the same password, we ultimately want the hashed value to be different. So salting is going to help that. And then the new standard is really becoming two-factor authentication. Ideally, we would incorporate two-factor authentication into this course. We can't just because we don't have a mail server. So we don't have the ability to send out an email or a text message with two-factor authentication, but in most modern web applications, we should be enabling two-factor authentication so that if a password is compromised or accessed, we then have an additional factor, either an SMS code or a security question or even a biometrics marker, a retinal scan, thumbprint, something like that. And then we're not going to get into this in this course, but we will next semester in our ASP.NET course. We'll also want to talk about authorization. So we're going to stick with implementing basic authentication in this class, but that's kind of like level 1 security is authentication. Level 2 security is authorization. What's the difference between authentication and authorization? Something we need to be really clear on. Next semester, we'll implement both levels of security. But what does that mean? Authentication versus authorization. Okay, authorization is who can make what changes to the system. Yep. Okay, authentication is about identity. So that's level 1. Who are you, right? That's all we're basically going to do in this class is we want to process to identify our users, who has an account and who doesn't. And for someone who has an account, which person are they? Authorization is that second level. It's once we've identified who the user is, what are they allowed to do? So we might, for example, let some users modify data and other users view it only. We can control access control to individual pages, or we can control items within pages. So if we are all looking at the lesson 10 folder, we can see that this page includes both authentication and authorization, right? Our authentication at the top, it shows our names. And if you've uploaded an avatar, it will show. So this is around our identity, who we are. But what things can you see on my screen? Where can you see an example of an authorization check being done? If you and I are both looking at this same folder, we see different things. Right, so I've got, for example, this row of buttons. So there's an authorization check based on our what group we're a member of. If you're a member of the faculty or the instructor group, you get these items are visible. Where else do you see? What other elements can you see? Yeah, I've got the course admin in my nav. So there's an if statement here that shows or hides that link. That's right, Yama. Yep, I get the settings. I also get all these little drop downs here and checkboxes. I can also see elements that are invisible to you. So there's lots of authorization checking here because they want to ensure that the instructors have access to control the content in the course, but the students, you get a read-only view. You don't have all these options to make changes. Alex, we cover sanitization a little bit. We won't go too deep into it. A little bit. So we're not really going to implement authorization, but in this course, but we will next semester. And then next week, we'll also talk about SSL. We've talked a little bit about encryption. So by default, HTTP traffic is plain text. So if I go to my bank's website, I click on the login, I enter my account number and my password, that traffic goes from my browser to my internet service provider, and then all the way across the internet with potentially multiple stops before it arrives at my bank. All of that stuff is sent in plain text. So any hacker that accesses that traffic, they can easily read those credentials. So SSL is used to encrypt all of our HTTP traffic. So we'll talk a bit more about SSL next week, a bit more about why it's important, and I'll show you some resources about how you would go about setting up SSL if you were going to build a web application for somebody. And then how do we force requests to use it to ensure that all our traffic, all our messaging back and forth is encrypted. So we'll talk more about SSL next week. Okay, so let's get started on implementing this. So the first thing we're going to need to do is let's open up our project and get it running. And I'm already connected. Fortunately, I've had no downtime with the server today. Been emailing back and forth with our tech support team. I'm not sure what they've changed. So far, fingers crossed, we've got no outages. So connect to the VPN, and you'll want to start up your web server. And I should be able to load my PHP tunes site locally in the browser. Okay. So I've got my artists. Here. So we will create register and login pages. To save us time, actually, we can grab these first. To save us time, I actually have just uploaded the HTML for this to the server. So you can download these two files. So we'll deal with our database in a minute. Here's register.php. Here's login. You can just download these files into your PHP Tunes project. They're pretty simple files. They're fairly basic forms. I will show you. Just download them to the root of PHP Tunes. So here's the register page. So it's basically just an HTML form that includes our header at the top. But the only thing here that is unfamiliar is I've used a regular expression. Regular expressions could be an entire course on their own. So I'm not going to do a deep dive into the syntax. A few students this morning were very curious about every part of this regular expression. I will leave that up to you to do a little reading on your own if you're curious about the syntax. I'll just explain the output of what this expression does without going over it one character at a time. So our pattern here is we're checking anywhere in the string, first of all, for a digit. That's this /d. Make sure there is at least one number in the input. This checks that there is a character between A and Z. There's a lowercase letter somewhere in the password. This part of the expression checks that there's one uppercase. And the final part sets a minimum length of 8 characters. Again, if you want to make that longer, you can. The last parameter is empty. If you wanted a maximum length, we could put in another number here that would be set as a maximum. So our password rules, I've added an explanation here, minimum of 8 characters. We're not asking for special character, but a digit, an upper, and a lowercase. The login form looks similar. There's no regular expression here. We're not telling people what password to enter. That would actually be a clue to hackers. So this is just standard form with our header above. So by creating these pages, the register and login links in our navigation bar that we added last week, these should be functional now. So last week when I clicked register or log in, I got a 404 error. If we go to if I look online, so here's our live site from last week, right? When I click register or click login, we go to our 404 page. But now that we've created these files in the local project, these links now work. And our instruction shows up here so that users, they shouldn't guess. Okay. So when we're going to take a pause now. When we come back, we need to do 3 things to get all this working. Number 1, we need to build a users table in the database. I've put a script up on D2L for that. We then want to be able to register new users. Dominic, if we have time, we will. Yes, we'll see. And then once we can register a new user, we'll also want to check before we register a user that that username doesn't already exist, so we don't get 2 users with the same username. And then once we can register, we'll add a page that will check our login attempts and validate them in the database. Okay? And yes, if we've got time, we can make it so that the password is visible or we have the ability to view. All right, let's take a pause here. I don't think I need to put anything on GitHub yet. I haven't really done anything other than download these 2 pages exactly as they are on D2L. So I'll just wait to push to Git. So Dominic, remind me if we have time, we'll try to do it. Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break here, come back in just after 1 o'clock, and then we'll get working on our user registration.